Welcome to Shift or Get Off the Pot, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and into action so you can make your dreams your reality. Let's get to it. Hi, I'm Kim Thompson, and today we are going to get all into uncovering and living your purpose. My guest today knows quite a bit about making a major shift in his life because he left his business as a CPA and co-founded a personal development company called 5 Year You, where they really specialize in the modality of energy healing. So welcome, Andrew Dewar. That's quite a shift.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's not a leap that I thought I was going to take, but it's the leap that ended up happening. So I'm very grateful for it.
Very linear position as a CPA, more brain-based, and then you get into a personal development industry or the personal development industry. And when you are working quite a bit with energy healing, that's very different. That's creative. That's more emotional. What led you to that?
Accidents all along the way, actually. What ended up happening was I had some past trauma that I had experienced, but I knew about and felt like I had dealt with. And that had propelled me into a very, very safe lifestyle, such as being an accountant and doing all the things that that life seemed to make sense at the time. So, having the house, the wife, the kids, paid off mortgage, all that stuff, anything I could do to be safe was what I did. And then what happened along the way in the last couple of years was life kind of gave me a little bump against the head, metaphorically and physically. I got a concussion and things started to shift a little bit. And I recognized that I didn't feel safe anywhere. So I first went to do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprogramming. And you go in for a session and it's an hour and you talk about an event that you want to work on, and a light bar kind of goes back and forth. You can do it with paddles or you're basically reprogramming your brain. I was walking around with fists for 20 years and just constantly assessing my environment about what would be safe and what wouldn't be, and not even aware that I was doing it because I had started doing it as a young kid when I was 12 years old. My sister, who has severe autism, decided out of the blue that she wanted to try to kill me, and that led to 2 years of her sporadically coming after me with whatever she could find, books, scissors. She would just grab something and throw it. It didn't matter. So when that happened, I learned very quickly that I needed to find a way to be safe. And where most of us go to our homes to be safe, I didn't really have that growing up. So here I am walking around thinking, this is my normal and maybe it's everybody's normal. And I'm walking around making fists. And then I kind of recognized that I was assessing everybody by this standard of are you going to hurt me? And it kind of got to that point where I couldn't live like that anymore. So I went into my EMDR sessions going look, I don't feel safe anywhere. And so the way it was explained to me is we have this foundational belief, and then we kind of, we put a layer on it and we start building our Jenga blocks on top. Well, EMDR kind of has you go in and pull out one of the bottom blocks, and then the belief structure will collapse on top of it. And then you can reprogram and create a new belief system around it. So one that serves you better, or at least is not the belief that's been holding you back.
Did you realize when you went into that basic fear was there and why it was there?
Not to the extent that I do today, but I did have an awareness. I kind of, when people would ask, it's not like I had blocked the trauma out of my mind or anything like that. When we would talk with people, it would be, do you have a sibling? Yeah, I have a sister. She has autism. And I just kind of leave it at that. But, the events were still very, very fresh in my mind. And then there were just certain things that I learned to live with, I think we all do with trauma. If somebody would put something near my head, even just wave their hand, I would be very jerky and
You'd flinch.
I would flinch, but I would physically react like somebody was attacking me, when it's just it's no, it's just a waiter walking by with a tray that got a little too close to my personal space. It didn't hit me or anything. It just but like that was the kind of overloaded sensory that I was carrying for so many years, and it was wearing on me, and my health was deteriorating. And it was when my health deteriorated that this was suggested to me, because I really didn't want to do talk therapy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wanted something that was going to have an effect fast. And when this was presented to me, it was, it was something that sounded really interesting, and I figured I'd give it a try. The worst case is I try it once and I don't like it or it doesn't work. And through like 2 or 3 months, I would go once or twice a week for these sessions. And as we worked through these things, sometimes I would walk out and I would feel amazing. I'd feel like, the gorilla had been lifted off my shoulders. And other times I felt like I had just clawed myself out of the biggest hole ever, and I was just wiped. I would sleep in my car before I could drive home. I was just so exhausted. So
you're bringing up a lot of trauma.
Yeah. It's I think a lot of times we put our past in what I call the emotional garage, and we just kind of put it on a shelf, and we go, okay, I know that's there. It's on the shelf, but I don't need to deal with it anymore. It's in a box. It's fine. Well, I had done that with everything in my life, and suddenly the emotional garage was full and overflowing, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And the results were physically, I was like, I had indigestion, I would cough up blood. I was just like, I was not doing good, and I would do things. I was like eliminating everything in my diet, thinking like, maybe it's just something I'm eating, so I cut out everything. And it was at that point when I had eliminated everything that somebody had pointed out to me. My acupuncturist actually at the time had said, like, this is an emotional thing that you need to consider looking at. And that's kind of when I started to look into things that were off spreadsheet, as I like to call them, from my accountant mind, where, everything I had kind of done was based in 3D physicality, and looking at things going, okay, well, it's an emotion. It's not really a big deal. And I've come to realize that, yeah, emotions are a very big deal. And so is all the energy around us and how we handle things, how we process things. And I had really just closed myself off to all of it because I couldn't handle it at a young age. And, life.
Well, I think a lot of people would close themselves off to that, because 2 points that I want to get to here that you brought up just now. And the first one is that you said, it was coming out physically, and our bodies will always respond, right? They'll show us something. But what I heard a long time ago from a very good friend of mine who is a social worker, marriage and family therapist, who said that when abuse is physical, it will come out emotionally. So if somebody's been physically beaten, it will come out emotionally, right? And then when someone is emotionally abused, verbally beaten down, it will oftentimes show symptoms in the body and come out physically. And so, like sometimes there's one before the other that you'll start to see and you go, okay, these are the things I have to pay attention to. So that's always kind of stuck in my mind, because I've always looked at that and thought, okay, those are telltale signs to pay attention to. But I also think when you talk about your sister being autistic, did you feel like perhaps you kind of used that as an excuse? Like somebody would use, maybe some living with an alcoholic. Oh, well, he's enraged, or he's, lashing out because he's an alcoholic. It's almost like you excuse the behavior so that you kind of go, I'm just going to go forward now, rather than kind of dealing with it and saying, wait a minute, even though that is an issue or something that they have, it still doesn't lessen the blows to you.
It's a really good question. I've never considered that. I would say no. I think when I was growing up, there was kind of like this pre-incident and post-incident. And pre-incident, nobody really. I'm in my 40s now, so I grew up at a time in the 80s where we didn't really know a lot about autism. My sister looked quote unquote normal. And it was only once you started talking with her that you could recognize that, she was like she's a 4-year-old in a 40-something-year-old's body. And and it took her a decade to get to 4 years old. And I think when I look back at it, I can see that I was her protector. And then at a point that flipped and she became the aggressor. And I never really could put together why that was. And the truth was, the reason really doesn't matter in the end. It's just going to be the story I put around it. So when I look at it, there were 2 years where, I slept in the basement. My dad would sleep with me in the basement with our feet against the door because she could wake up at 2 a.m. and come and attack me. So my 12-year-old brain made a whole bunch of reasons around it. And it's just kind of that is just the way it is. And, it is what it is. And I never really thought too much about it because I was processing it all as a 12-year-old. And now as a 40-something-year-old, I look at it very differently, but I still have those little beliefs that will show up where it kind of goes in and it's like, right, that's a very old belief system that's still there. And I assume it's right, but it's not. It's just something that I had to condition myself to in those moments of trauma.
I would think that at 12 years old, that would shatter your self-esteem because it is a personal attack on you. And as a 12-year-old, in your mind, trying to, like you said, process it, figure out why me? What did I do wrong? And I would think that you would carry that on life and go, what did I do wrong? Or can I ever be good enough?
Yeah, I definitely have. I've definitely grown up with the feeling of not being good enough. From the time I was born, like long before my sister and any of this stuff, I've always been the one that's wanted to make everybody feel like they fit in. I've always wanted to help people. That's just been my nature. But as far as like not feeling valued, or, feeling like I deserve to be hurt, I don't look at it like maybe back then I did. And now I kind of look at it and I've reframed it all to be like, this had to happen to me so that I could be a better me, a better version of me, a better healer, a better helper, a better friend, better everything to people. Because without those instances, I don't become that. You can learn about trauma in a book. You can learn about all the rough things in life. And if that's the way you learn about it, I don't wish anybody learning these things on the go in their actual experience, but we do. And when we learn those things, they make us better at relating to other people and kind of understanding the human experience. So when people can come to me and go, you know what, I'm struggling, I know what that feels like. I did not have the golden touch or anything like that. So I get to choose the narrative around this. And I didn't realize I was choosing it my whole life. But the narrative now is like, this has happened for me to help other people. And that's kind of what I choose to tell myself. And I could get on the pity party bus pretty quickly most of the days and just kind of go like, poor me, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help me. It keeps me down. It doesn't help me helping other people. It's a choice, but I only have recently started to view it as that. I can be honest with you on about seeing it in a new light these past couple of years.
It's shifting your perspective, but that's really the operative word is help. It doesn't help me. I always like to look at things and say, okay, I know that happened in my lifetime and that was the thing I went through. That was the experience I went through. But you're right. You have a choice. You can look at it and say, all right, I can hang on to this, victim. Or I can say, how do I choose to look at this? And can I see it as something that now has helped me in my life now and maybe where it's taken me? I think we can always if we can find one little bit in there that we can be grateful for, it completely shifts the energy of everything. It diffuses that energy so that now you can kind of open yourself up to really utilizing it to the benefit of really not only healing yourself, but to help others as well. And it sounds like that's what you've really done now, going through this, uncovering it all, and then saying, wow, how can I use this now to serve people? Because look, as a CPA, you were serving people, you were helping people. Now you're helping people, though, in a different way. And and connecting to them in a different way, I would imagine. Well, really connecting to them too, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a completely different part of my brain, and it's a part of life that, you know, every day I still have these little micro experiences or these little things that happen, and it blows my mind because the accountant brain is still there, kind of going like, I don't understand this. But it didn't understand too when we would look at a light for an hour and then, you know, need to sleep for several hours. It didn't understand the energy stuff. It's only this new part of my consciousness that's coming in and going like, there is way more here than we see or physically experiencing. And when we can start to unpack those things and let them go, then we can move faster. And that's really what I'm doing for myself, and what I try to do for anybody that I come in contact with is, you know, what's holding you down and how can we help you shake it loose or let it go. And a lot of times we hold on to stories that just are so old we forget why they serve us, and probably don't serve us anymore. But most of us have a story that we've built our lives around, you know, oh, this happened to me, or I can't do this because of this, or I didn't get the education. And yet at the same time, there's other people that have the exact same experience and they've crafted a completely different narrative. So where I come in is I come in, and for the people that are wanting to change, we examine it and we look at the things that are holding them back, and then we see what they're willing to release. Because a lot of times we'll say we want to release something, but a good part of us is holding on to it, because who are we if we're not how we've defined ourselves for for all of our life? It's really hard to get lost and to rediscover ourselves.
That's a great point, because you could change if you choose to, or you can hang on to those old stories and say, well, I grew up in this, or this is my money story. And it's almost like, at what point do you think, and maybe it is just a personality thing, people, why do they continue to hang on to those stories, first of all? And at some point, where do you think the breaking point is? And is it that they have to almost reach a breaking point that they say, enough's enough?
I think a lot of us do reach a breaking point, and enough's enough. And in my case, enough wasn't enough. It was enough, and then a lot more, because I was so fighting against changing the life that I had created. That was my safe bubble. And it may not have been much to anybody else, but it was my safe bubble, and it meant a lot. I do think that, you asked, why do we hold on to these stories? It's the same reason why we hold on to, a second place ribbon in the first grade. It's because it means something to us, and it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. It just makes sense to us. And, it's the same reason why, we hoard things that belong to other people, because we're holding on to that memory of them. It's not the physical item. It's what that item represents in our mind. So when we're looking at the story, the narrative that we've created around who we are and why we are and how we are, when you feel that you can change that narrative, when you can start, I think a big thing for me was that I switched from a victim mentality to a hero mentality. And what I mean by that, and I can sum it up in one line, is that things stopped happening to me and they started happening for me. And when you make that shift of it happening to happening for, suddenly you look at your life very differently. You start looking at things and going, how is this benefiting me? How is, I'm in Chicago this week, and there was a tornado warning yesterday. Never had that happen before. Very, very, very new to me. And I will be completely honest, part of me was very afraid. But this other part came up through it, and it was like, I wonder why we're experiencing this. It was almost like this life curiosity thing of like, I wonder how this is going to play out at a different time or in a different way. Because it's these moments that we have that we kind of, when we start paying attention to them, we can go, oh, I had this happen 2 days ago, and now this person's asking me about it today, and I can actually relate to this conversation rather than have this textbook knowledge of, oh, that's really too bad for you. So
key points there, because you're right. It is making that little shift, and and actually words have so much power. And to just shift that from happening to me, happening for me, and just what that does, because that really does open you up to a whole new way of living. Things just seem to go a little bit easier. You feel like you're more, for me personally, I feel like I'm more in the flow, and I can start looking at things and go, it's okay. It's all going to work out because I'm here right now for some type of reason, and this has happened for this reason. And you can always look at that and learn from it too, and go back and say, okay, that's interesting. Now I'm learning from this if you choose to. But I think that requires you to ask questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it requires you to ask questions. I think it requires you to get curious about your life. And the accountant brain in me is like, well, no, you're just here and you go to work and you do your thing, you retire and have kids and die, not necessarily in that order, but you do whatever the plan is. And I did the plan, and the plan was just the beginning. It wasn't it was my plan. It wasn't life's plan. And when we can get curious of going and starting to look at things and go, why is this happening? Why do I keep having this thought pattern that doesn't make me feel good, but I just can't seem to shake it? Then we can kind of get into all the different things about who we are and how we are. And when you start to study yourself, it's quite fascinating when you get curious about why you do the things you do, why you maybe don't turn on a light switch when you enter a room because you were taught to save power your whole life, and don't leave a light on, or how you serve everybody else before yourself because that's just, you're told to be selfless, or it's just good manners. There's different reasons for all this stuff, and none of them are good or bad. It's just kind of bringing an awareness to your behaviors and how you are, and that is a really powerful thing when you can start to be the student of your own life.
Yeah, I love that, being the student of your own life, but also seeing things as not good or bad, because that diffuses that energy too, where it's just now, okay, this is just the way it is. And I can either choose to change it if I want to. Yes. I mean, I know for a long time, I would do certain things where I was like, okay, I can't walk around that way. I have to walk this way, because it was more of a superstitious thought. And I know where that came from. That was my mom, because my mom just had these little things that she would do. And I still to this day don't know why or how. She's gone now, but I never even thought to ask her. It's kind of like, if you've ever heard that story where the woman used to always cut off the crust of the bread when she would pack the lunches for her children going off to school. And it was like, oh, and my mom used to do that. And then I heard about that one day, and I'm like, what? And I did finally ask her, it's like, it's just the way we do it. But it was just, the same thing. She did it because her mom did it. And then in that whole story too, it was classic. It was just because it fit in the bag or the box or whatever it was. Yeah. And so often it is that we just get caught in these repetitive patterns of life because it's just that learned behavior. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this, how you get up in the morning, you go through your routine because you're just doing the same old thing. And we're so used to that. But I think we're used to that because we've been conditioned from an early age. You go to school, and then you go to college, and then you get a job, and then you do blah, 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 blah. And I believe that with the internet and with technology now, more and more people are starting to say, not for me. I'm going to change. There are some opportunities out there, which I think has shed a lot of light on being curious about ourselves and being open to more opportunities out there. But when you're talking about this, you're talking about all the transitions you've made and how you started getting curious about yourself. And I really want to get into this modality that you use and the theta energy healing, because that to me is fascinating. And the whole idea of energy healing is fascinating. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and how you incorporate that in working with people.
So maybe I'll go through my story a little bit and just tell you how I get here, because we're at the beginning here. So after this EMDR thing, I opened up to the fact that things can change and they don't necessarily have to be in a pill form, which I thought was really good. There's that saying, I just recently came off anti-anxiety medication, and there is a place for all this stuff. It's not a one size fits all for anyone. So I went to, I was out for lunch and I was telling somebody about EMDR and they said, oh, you should try Reiki. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, it's this kind of thing where they move energy around and it's kind of like a massage, but not really. And it's just interesting. I think you'd like it. And so I just kind of shrugged and I said, okay. So I went for my first Reiki session and, she did her or touching the chakras and everything else. And at the end, she said, your sacral chakra, which is is like your life force energy, was in a cage. And so we released it. And you might feel a little tired after this. And I kind of just smiled and thought, okay, this is really goofy to me. I laid on your table for 45 minutes. You touched my shoulders, my knees, and my feet and my head. And
my life energy is in a cage. What?
And my life energy.
You're going, I don't get that.
Yeah. So I just kind of smiled and said, okay. She's like, I went home at noon on Saturday and I didn't wake up until Monday morning. And it just like, and again, that kind of woke me up to like, okay, so energy is this thing that I clearly have no idea about. They don't teach that in accounting school. So I got a little more curious.
As you walk around with your fists closed.
As I walk around, with my fists clenched and not understanding these things. And then I went for another session a little while later and she said, have you ever tried theta healing? And, just being curious as things show up. I'm like, no, what's that? And again, it's kind of hard to describe, but I think it would really benefit you. And I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of always these things that start showing up when you open up to the universe. And I went and I got there and she's like, what do you want to work on today? And I said, I don't know. I don't understand what this is about, but somebody told me to come here, so I'm here. And she's like, well, what's something that's on your mind right now? I said, I'd really like to feel abundant. I said, I go through life saving money, working with money and all these things. And I just never feel like I have enough, or even when I do have enough, I don't have that feeling. So in a session, we do muscle testing and we test for subconscious beliefs and just trapped energy through different modalities. And we did some work on this. And then a couple months later, I won a trip to anywhere in the world and $1,000 spending money. And I've never won anything ever. So yeah. So I'm like, okay, so there's something here with this. So at the same time, I am wanting to help people grow. I've always been a huge personal development fan. I love Joe Dispenza. I've been listening to, Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy all the way up to everybody today. I go to the Hay House events. I just love it. And on my birthday, I walked into this shop, this metaphysical shop, and they were offering the last theta healing trainings. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And this person was doing her last series of theta healing trainings. And I thought, that is so weird that the day I walk into this place, I see this. So I signed up for it and started doing the trainings. And I felt like I was the most behind person on day one because everybody could feel things that, my accountant brain was still kind of going like, yeah, you might feel that, but that's just in your head. And that's just in your head. And then as time went on and the more exercises we did, I started to tune in, as we call it. And that's kind of what led me to be an energy healer. That was the steps. So what we do in theta healing is we will, in a typical session, we do it online or face-to-face. It just depends on the situation. We'll have a conversation. You'll come in with something you want to work on. Maybe you have anxiety. Maybe you have just a frustration that keeps repeating in your life. And we'll talk about it and we kind of dig to the bottom of where that belief might be. And it's a very, very quick conversation. It takes maybe 10, 15 minutes. And that's where wanting to change really has to be there, because saying I don't know over and over and over again might be true, but there has to be a willingness. And I find with everybody, they kind of, when they get to this place, they're ready to shed whatever is holding them back. And then we'll do some muscle testing. And for anybody, you can Google muscle testing. It's basically what it does is your body knows truths that your mind probably is blocking from you. And we can hold different beliefs on different on different levels. So we have what we're taught is we have like core beliefs, which is this lifetime, the things that we've experienced. So, this conversation all the way back to when we were born. Then we have genetic beliefs, which are things that have been handed down through us genetically. Then we have social, kind of societal beliefs, which are things that have been around for hundreds of years that we just don't question, or just like the bread, like maybe it wasn't just your mom that was cutting the crust off. It was, maybe it was grandma and great grandma and great 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 grandpa, because they used the ends for whatever, for, bread pudding or whatever. And then we have our soul beliefs. And what we'll test for initially is for things that might be missing. So you might be missing certain feelings based on their definition of creator, of like universal energy. People call it God, Buddha, Allah, whatever. I just have learned to call it energy at this stage. Not that any other way is wrong. I find it's the easiest for me to communicate. And then when we will do that, we find out what's missing. So a lot of times for myself, one of the early things was just worthiness. So you can't feel abundant in my original case there without feeling like you're worthy of abundance, or just worthy, period. And because of what I had been raised with, I had definitely told myself, well, you're not even worthy of your sister's love, or to be, protected, or to protect yourself in a way that matters. So you're not worthy. So I didn't know what that feeling was. And what we do is the theta trainer, the theta healer, will go into a theta state, and they'll get your permission to download missing feelings, emotions, replace self-limiting beliefs with self-enabling beliefs. It all happens with your permission. And then that goes through the course of an hour. And then, there's a period usually after that, up to 10, 14 days, depending on the person, where it kind of integrates and things start to change. And I really wish my accountant brain could get this better in explaining, but like I see it over
I think you did a great job in explaining it. I do. And it's interesting to me that as you were talking, I was thinking about how could you not have felt abundant when you paid off your mortgage in 6 years?
Yeah.
That's pretty unheard of. Most people haven't done that. So you would think, wow, okay, this guy really understands money. He's got it down. But then when you linked it back to the feeling of unworthiness, or not being able to, you couldn't even earn your sister's love. I think that's interesting, because it starts to help you understand, okay, what's really behind this? It's not just a matter of I don't feel abundant, because you can say, oh, I don't feel abundant. I can do all these affirmations on prosperity and stuff. But until you understand where that core belief is, or what it is, then, and I don't think you have to spend years on a therapist's couch, which is why I think this is so important, to be able to kind of I can go deep into that theta state, and then just let me look at it and go, okay, what do I want to do with this? And that's really the key. Like, now I know. Once you know, then you have the power to say, what do I want to do with this? So I think you did a great job in explaining that. But the theta level, because there's different levels. So you want to just explain a little bit about the different levels, like the beta,
sure.
alpha.
So there's 5 levels, but we're typically in 4. So you and I right now are in what I'd probably label mid beta, which is like active. We're awake, we're conversing back and forth, we're absorbing the environment around us. Alpha is a slightly more relaxed state, where it happens when you close your eyes. So we're not talking about sleep, but we're just like when you close your eyes, your brain kind of goes to a lower frequency level. The theta level is one level below that, and it is in between sleep and that alpha consciousness, where we train to go up to creator, and basically our brains kind of open up to other things. So one of the things that I do in a session is, we make a connection. So I'll go up and ask to do a body scan. with the client's permission, and the client says yes, and I'll just scan their body, and I'll start feeling things in my body that they're feelings, and it'll be things like, you know what, your throat is really tight. You're really holding back talking your truth to somebody right now, and it'll come out. Or I've had things like, why is my eye hurting right now? And they'll say, like, well, I just had a surgery on my eye a couple of weeks ago and it still hurts. And then the level below that, below theta, is delta. And delta is like you are in restorative sleep. You're fully out. So theta is kind of that state where you go in between closing your eyes and going off to deep sleep. But we learn how to stay in that state to help others.
And where that creative energy really is, that we can start to tap into and create. But I love that explanation of it too, because we really are all connected. We are all connected and all part of this, as you say, energy, this universal energy I call God. I was raised Christian, but studied different religions in school. And so I understand that too. And I do believe there is an energy that has created everything and ties us all together. And I think that's why we can get that connection. I've often heard that when you were talking about feeling different things in different parts of the body, I have heard quite a while ago, and I don't remember who this was from, somebody in energy healing, that when you have a sore throat, it is just anger. You're holding your anger in. And that's a telltale sign right there for your body. So I know that anytime my kids were feeling something like that, I'd say, get out a pad of paper. Let's start journaling. What's going on? What's going on in school? Are you upset with me? Are you upset in the family? And we would just I got them in this habit of journaling so they could understand what their body was trying to tell them, especially kids when they're younger too, because they can't articulate that. But when you can understand that, that's why I love the work you're doing, because yes, it's helping people that are now going through transitions in life or whatever, trying to figure things out. But man, I think that this is so important at any stage of life, because if you can teach a child how to pay attention to their body, imagine what can happen when they grow up and they're an adult, and just how connected they're going to be to their own self, their own emotions, and what a difference they can make and an impact in the world.
Yeah. It's the more awareness we can bring at a younger age, the better it is, for sure. I mean, even adults, just knowing that, when you that tightness in your throat is maybe you're holding back saying something. And it doesn't necessarily need to be said to that person, but that energy that's in there needs to be released. So if you're feeling frustrated with someone, you might not need to say to that person, you're being such and such way that I don't like, because it's really more about how you feel. And you're not trying to change that person, and saying something to that person may help or may hinder things. But like you said, writing a letter, just even letting that energy out allows the energy to flow. And, again, chakras were something that I didn't understand when I was explained to them during Reiki, and I know a lot more about them than I ever did. And I think I trump most accountants' knowledge on those things now, but I got nothing to back that up, but
I would imagine you do, though.
Yeah. So I think the more we can discover about ourselves in the different ways, whether it's how we think, the energy, our patterns, our conditioning, the more we can see how we're constructed, the more we can reconstruct ourselves in a way that maybe we choose to, rather than feel that we're forced to. And I think that's one of the big things I acknowledged, was that I was living my life by accident, and now I am trying to live my life as best as I can on purpose. And the difference there is that I get up in the morning and I think, what does Andrew want to do? What is best for Andrew today? How does Andrew help and feel good? Versus getting up and going, okay, whose books do I have to do today? What are all these things that I have to do? And I know that sounds kind of Pollyanna for sure, but again, I could have had the bookkeeping accounting job with that same thing. I could have come out and like, who do I get to help today versus what do I have to do today? Same actions, same workload, just a different mindset. And that mindset is really the big thing that we're talking about, because when you can go to things on purpose, you acknowledge that you're in control, and that when you're in control, then you can change things if you don't like them.
Well, and it's is perspective. It's all a matter of how, like you said, you could have changed it and said, who do I get to help today? And it's just a matter of where you're at in that space too. And obviously you needed to get into this because I believe that we are all born on purpose and with purpose. And it took you something to make you kind of look at this and say, well, wait a minute, I want to go down here and explore this now. Because it is a healing. It's a healing for you. And I think a lot of times we're teaching what we had to learn first.
Yeah, it's a big teaching. It's, in a lot of ways, it would have been nicer to grow up without the traumas and the anxieties and the worries and the fears. But now when I talk with somebody who comes in or comes online for a session and says, I'm feeling anxious, I go, okay, I get that. I get that on a physical level, an emotional level. I have been there. I can help you a lot faster than thinking back to a flow chart that I may have learned in college and goes like, okay, anxiety, is it this? Is it that? It's a completely different approach. Not that either one is good or bad. It's just, when you are with somebody who has had a similar experience, it's different. I can't explain it. Like there's a bonding there that happens where you go, oh, you get me. You've been through this. You've worn the uniform and you get it.
100%. There's a camaraderie because you understand that. And you also, I think because you've been through it, you have a keen understanding and you can see through really what I would call the BS, because we all have it. Like it's very easy to fall back and just go, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then you can go, hey, I got you. I made that excuse too. Or I understand because I held on to that limiting belief as well. And I don't mean BS and kind of being rude and saying to people, oh yeah, right. You're all just, full of it. But at the same time, it's like we make excuses for ourselves, which just truly hold ourselves back. And when you've been through it, you can look at somebody and say, I know, I've been there. Walk the same path.
Exactly. It's a nice place to be. Something that just kind of came to mind. And one of the things that I ask people, and I'm going to be upfront and honest that I hate when I get asked this because it hits a nerve every time. But the question is, why is holding on to this serving you? Or how is holding on to this still serving you? And that's usually that point where people will kind of go, oh my God, you're right. I am holding on to it. Or their ego brain kind of comes in and goes, I'm not holding on to this. This happened and this is a thing and this is who I am. And it's like, yes, it is who you are. And it's what's made you here. But you can put the backpack down at any point. You don't have to keep walking with it. You can acknowledge that, it served me up until now and I need to let it go if I want to walk further, farther, and faster.
Further, farther, and faster. Yep, exactly. Let it go, move forward. But I absolutely love the work that you're doing because, again, it can be changed quickly if you choose to do so. It's not like you have to sit there and go, I remember somebody saying a long time ago to me, well, it's just another layer of the onion you have to peel away. And I'm thinking, how big is this damn onion, man? I'm going to go through my whole life. Forget it. I'm like, let's just get through it. Right. And like the movie Avatar, I just want to plug into something and go, okay, we're good. Let's move on to the next thing because I want to move forward. So I love that you say that you just put the backpack down. It's your choice. And it really does come down to that. Once you open yourself up to saying like you did, okay, I'm curious. I'm going to be willing. I'm just going to show up and see what happens. Then everything starts to align for us. And then we have the option. Are we going to walk that path? Are we going to do that? And are we willing to let go of these stories? So thank you so much for being here and sharing this information. Because I think, again, as I started out the show, it was really talking about uncovering that purpose and then stepping into that purpose. And I think there's such an example of that because it's really, you decided to show up for yourself and do some of that healing. And now look at the work that you're doing for other people and helping them nip things in the bud and get on with their lives. So again, the company is 5 Year You that you co-founded. Right. And I know you have a podcast as well.
Yep. Same name.
Is the podcast 5 Year You?
Yeah, it's 5 Year You as well.
Okay. And then your gift, I know that you have a gift, and we're going to link all of this down in the show notes, of course, but the gift is notes from your future self, correct?
Yeah. So
and I think that's a great idea too.
Thanks.
I love that. Who doesn't want to get a note from, okay, my future self.
Yeah, a daily note of inspiration from your future self, kind of helping you along the way, because I think we can all use that every day. Every day is a new adventure, and we just got to start it off on the right foot.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode, and stay tuned for another episode of Shift or Get Off the Pot.